Hi, everyone. I'm Gil, a product manager on the privacy attribution team here at AppsFlyer. My main focus is iOS measurement and, of course, SKAN, which we all enjoy working with so much. Our goal for today is simple: to give you as many actionable tips and best practices as we can to help you get the most out of your iOS campaign management. And if each of you walks away with at least one tip that you can start and implement tomorrow, we will consider this session as a success. And today I'm super excited to have Priya with me. She's a director of product at Moloco, and she really knows the industry deeply. So Priya, the stage is all yours.
Thanks, Ted, and hi everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I'm Priya Bhasin. I lead ads performance here at Moloco. I joined very recently and interestingly came from Apple, where I worked on Apple search ads. I've seen behind the scenes for SKAN from the discussions at Apple, and also very excited to see how advertisers have found interesting ways to leverage SKAN, and very excited to share some of the industry best practices here. And very much agree with Gil's point. Would love to see how you guys apply actionable insights from this session.
Perfect. Thank you, Priya. So I just want to mention that we have a few additional team members here today to answer questions on the Q&A box. So feel free to shoot over any question if you have. So I think we can now review the agenda for today. So for the warm-up, we will kick off this session with some adoption stats. And then we will get down to business and we'll share tip after tip with you. Now, some of these tips will be generic for iOS measurement, but most of them will focus specifically on SKAN. And I'll also give you a quick walkthrough of the tools we offer to help you optimize the SKAN conversion schema. And we will finish off with some industry insights for the different verticals, including a demo of a new conversion schema templates that we just launched last week. And aside from just being interesting, adoption stats are important because they show us how the market views SKAN, whether it's seen as an essential or optional. Plus, knowing how widely SKAN 4 has been adopted can really help you make the decision which version of SKAN is the right one for you. And I really like this funnel chart because it clearly shows the journey that iOS marketers go through. Initially, SKAN sounds like a name of a disease, but over time, you start to understand the basics of SKAN and you understand how it can help you in your marketing on iOS. And once you feel confident enough with SKAN, you'll start to notice the fragmentation challenges it brings. And this is exactly the point where you need a single source of truth and you're looking for a unified view for all your attribution sources. Now, I won't get into the details of SSOT, single source of truth solution, right now, but I really advise you to check it out later. And the first thing that we checked was SKAN adoption within our top tier customers, and we're seeing almost 50% adoption rate. Now, by adoption, we mean having a configured SKAN conversion schema and actively receiving SKAN postbacks. Now, these leading customers are usually well educated in SKAN, and they see that the value SKAN brings really worth the onboarding efforts. Many of these even have some dedicated teams that constantly fine-tune their conversion schema, and some of them even have data science teams that can help them fill the gaps where SKAN doesn't provide the full picture. But don't worry, our solutions are designed to simplify the onboarding process and reduce the need for complex analysis for you. So what about the adoption of SKAN version 4? It is kind of known that the adoption has been a bit hesitant, but we will constantly see a steady and positive trend in adoption. Right now, when we look at the total incoming SKAN prospects, we see that 26% is from SKAN version 4. Now, to be honest, unless the biggest networks decide to increase their support for SKAN 4, I don't expect any massive changes anytime soon to this number. It's kind of a chicken and an egg scenario where, on the one hand, customers don't want to adopt SKAN 4 if the networks they work with are not fully supporting it. But on the other hand, the networks are not really motivated to push this as long as the app adoption is still low. Now let's shift to the adoption among the networks. We first filter the top 10 networks by the volume of SKAN traffic that we receive. And then we analyze the percentage of SKAN traffic out of their total SKAN prospects. And it becomes clear that the adoption is inconsistent. On the one hand, we have Moloco, for example, with 80% of its traffic signed with SKAN version 4. But on the other hand, we have a few of the largest networks with less than 1% of their ads signed with SKAN version 4. Now, don't get me wrong, we see many other networks as well that have already adopted SKAN 4, and there's approximately 20 networks that sign in more than 70% of their ads with SKAN version 4, and the trends, as I mentioned before, is keep increasing over time. Now, the last figure that I find useful to share with you is how the trend of iOS budget allocation has evolved over time. When Apple just introduced app tracking transparency, the change shook the foundation of the industry, and due to the measurement challenges, marketers initially decreased their iOS budgets, as you can see here. And gradually, with the help of our SKAN solutions, of course, the industry adopted and realized that the challenges were manageable. And as a result, marketers increased their budgets for iOS. Now, this was especially important with the recent changes, of course, that the economic push to maximize profitability, and iOS has become even more attractive, especially since iOS users are known to spend more. Now, with all these adoption stats in mind, I'll hand it over to Priya to share Moloco takes on iOS measurement.
Thank you, Pierre. Please share my screen. Thank you, Gil. I'll go over some of the SKAN adoption trends here that we see at Moloco. Some of the advertiser archetypes of different attribution methods that are adopted by the advertisers, and their main pain points and best practices used within Moloco. On the advertiser trends of adoption, AppsFlyer presentation highlighted a growing industry shift towards SKAN adoption for attribution on iOS. Our internal analysis reflects very similar trends. We're seeing that number of advertisers who adopted SKAN grew almost doubled year over year, and the number of advertisers planning to adopt SKAN grew approximately by 2.5x year over year. Based on the advertisers' preferred attribution methods, we've bucketed advertisers into three key archetypes: those who measure on MMP only, those who measure on SKAN only, and those who have adopted a hybrid approach where they look at MMP and SKAN both. Each one of these attribution methods have their own implications, and wanted to walk through some of those implications. For advertisers who look at MMP only, attribution is much more granular and provides real-time performance insights. But the challenge for them is when they compare metrics against self-attribution networks, there are a lot of discrepancies. For SKAN-only advertisers, the attribution is deterministic, which uses Apple's internal identifiers, and therefore many advertisers see it as a source of ground truth. However, the challenge here is SKAN reporting is aggregated, it's not impression level, and it's not real time. And there's a lot of delays, which makes it hard for ad networks to optimize on real-time basis. And lastly, advertisers who adopted a hybrid approach, which is often used by a lot of networks, DSPs, and self-attribution networks. These are both distinct frameworks, and there can be some discrepancies between the numbers that you see on SKAN and MMP. But this is the approach that we recommend here at Moloco. Relying on MMP traffic is an important aspect for iOS campaigns because MMPs offer granular impression level data, and complementing it with SKAN in a privacy compliant insight way really helps DSP like Moloco to optimize at its best. Now I'll cover some of the pain points. Wanted to deep dive into the pain points we hear from advertisers in the second and third archetype. From our internal research, we've identified that the key points for advertisers who look at SKAN only or have taken a hybrid approach sit across three different areas. First, some advertisers notice discrepancies between MMP and SKAN. Second, a lot of advertisers are seeing missing conversion data due to unknown crowd anonymity tiers, which are essentially privacy thresholds enforced by Apple when using SKAN. And third, there are optimization challenges for SKAN reported metrics. I'll dive into how we are tackling these challenges at Moloco. When there is a discrepancy between MMP and SKAN, please know that this is expected. Some level of discrepancy is expected because of the fundamentally different attribution frameworks that we have. For instance, SKAN relies on its unique fidelity score for attribution, giving priority to StoreKit rendered ads over view-throughs, regardless of the recency. And this is very different from MMP's traditional look-back window of 7 days for click-based attribution. Additionally, various MMPs define clicks uniquely, creating inherent discrepancies in measurement results. In this privacy era, it makes more sense to interpret each attribution method performance individually and prioritize the broader performance trend over isolated metrics. This approach helps in understanding overall campaign effectiveness without getting caught up in differences between attribution models. The second issue we see is on the missing conversion data, which we also refer as high null rates. Meeting the crowd anonymity threshold on SKAN is another frequent challenge, often resulting in missing conversions. This may also contribute to higher CPIs on performance side, as anonymity threshold becomes harder to reach on a limited budget. For Moloco's advertisers, we recommend consolidating small campaigns into a few high-volume ones, and we also recommend setting budgets that yield a minimum of 20 to 25 installs per day. This is in line with AppsFlyer recommendations, which Gil will share shortly. And lastly, tackling the points above significantly improves SKAN performance. However, optimization remains a challenge, given SKAN only provides aggregated metrics, and impression level data is critical for our optimization and ML. To support advertisers leveraging Moloco, we continuously are investing and innovating on the ML side to improve our models that leverage SKAN. Recently, we're collaborating with several partners to test new optimization methods that achieved significant improvements for the partners in the pilot. We're excited about the potential of this new optimization coming out soon, so stay tuned for more. And this was reflected in our AppsFlyer performance index. Moloco's performance on iOS has been highlighted on this index based on AppsFlyer single source of truth. We've ranked third on the global all categories, also third on global non-gaming, and fourth for the global gaming for iOS power ranking. I'll hand it back to Gil. Gil, do you want to take it away?
Yes, I'll share my screen. Priya, just stop your sharing and I'll share mine. Exactly. Perfect. So thank you very much for the insights, Priya. As I told you before, one of our goals today is to overcome this educational barrier around SKAN by sharing the best practices. So I'm about to walk you through some of the practical tips we've put together based on the common questions and challenges that we frequently see that marketers are facing. And I'd like to start by repeating something that Priya just mentioned. Okay, just because it's one of the most impactful and easy to implement tips from this session. So we often see customers come to us and say, hey, we see 100% of our prospects coming with null value, leaving us with no ability to make any decisions. And the first thing that we check is how many campaigns they are running concurrently from the same network. And what we sometimes see is that they are running concurrently 5 or even 10 campaigns from the same network. Each of them generates low to no install per day. Now, as Priya mentioned, this is one of the key reasons to have high null rate, especially when you just start with SKAN and you onboard to SKAN. So the bottom line here is to consolidate the smaller campaigns and focus on the larger ones, especially when you just onboard to SKAN. Now, this one is also important for SKAN onboarding, okay, with the goal being, again, to avoid the null conversion values during the early stages of integrations. So based on our analysis, there is a known threshold of number of installs per app, per campaign, per day that you need to meet in order to avoid these null conversion values. And for SKAN 3, the number is around 120 installs, while for SKAN 4, this number has been reduced to just 20 installs per campaign per day. However, since some of the networks only partially support SKAN 4, we recommend playing it safe by targeting around 100 to 150 installs per campaign per day. Now, knowing this golden number and allocating the right budgets accordingly can really help you save weeks of back and forth with AppsFlyer and with the different networks, try to troubleshoot what's the issue that causes this high null rate. And the next one, many of the questions I get comes from customers that just want to compare SKAN data to other dashboards, whether it's the default dashboard on AppsFlyer, the internal BI system, or just the dashboards of the networks. Now, I understand that you used to have the maximum data freshness and making almost real-time analysis on any non-SKAN data. However, with SKAN, analyzing the data from the last 4 days means that you're looking on incomplete data. So keep in mind that SKAN includes a random delay, and for the most granular pieces of data, the fine conversion value, this delay can be up to 48 hours. And in addition to that, we as MMP need some time to process the data, of course. So the bottom line here is that in order to make informed decisions, try to avoid analyzing the last 3 to 4 days if you're analyzing SKAN data. And one more tip, stick to the plan. Every time you change your SKAN setup, you should expect a few days of inconsistent, ambiguous data. Now, this happens because on the one hand, we're updating the conversion values based on the previous schema that you have. But while at the same time, we read the postback and translate them into meaningful events using the new schema that you define. So 2 things to keep in mind here. First, after making the change, expect a few days, 3 to 4 days of data that is unreliable to make any decisions. And second, try to avoid making frequent changes every few days just to minimize the disruptions to the data. And following up on the previous tip, both we, AppsFlyer, and the big networks recommend to keeping campaign live for at least 1 month. There is no magic here, and the optimization algorithm of the networks needs some time to learn and improve the performance. Now, the concrete recommendation vary between 1 month to 2 months, but the key here is to avoid turning campaign on and off every week. And this is especially relevant if you just want to try and test SKAN, and then we see many customers that open a campaign for 2 weeks, do not achieve the performance they aimed, and then getting frustrated. And last but not least for this section, after making changes to the setup, try to maintain a steady budget. The performance and measurement are impacted by many factors. So if you adjust the budget while also changing the SKAN setup, and then you see drop in the performance, it becomes hard to link the change in performance to the root cause of the issue. So stay with me. I want to dive into the next section of how to configure SKAN conversion schema, and I'll walk you through some of the tools that we offer to help you simplify the process. And the first factor that we need to consider here is your monetization model. Let's start with apps that focus on in-app purchases. This is where a hybrid approach of revenue measurement and in-app event measurement is usually recommended, because alongside key metrics like return on investment, return on ad spend, these apps are usually interested in measuring the purchases and optimizing towards CPA. And the next group of apps that focus on in-app advertisement, this is where revenue measurement is typically the most dominant approach. We see almost 100% of these apps measure only revenue, so there's no need to combine it with in-app event measurement. And lastly, when we look on subscription-based apps, we see that they measure only events, or most of them at least, which completely makes sense because users don't generate revenue until the subscription is started, which often doesn't happen within the first 2 days. So this is the 3 types of monetization models. And the next factor to consider is that many networks, including the major ones, use SKAN signals for optimization. So if you're optimizing for value optimization, but you are not measuring revenue in your SKAN conversion schema, the networks won't have the data they need to provide you with strong performance. So while it might seem obvious for some of you, don't forget to measure the key elements that are the base of what you're optimizing for. And let's spend 2 minutes talking about 3 tools that we have to help you define and optimize the conversion schema. And the first feature is our revenue recommendation tool. As a reminder, due to SKAN limitations, you can't measure the exact revenue range, the exact revenue value, and this is why you need to define predefined revenue ranges. Now, defining those ranges is not always a straightforward task because it requires you to have deep understanding of how frequently your users spend on the app and the volume of their spending. So we developed this solution to save you time and effort conducting deep revenue analysis over time. The feature basically calculates the average revenue per paying user based on the data that we collect from the SDK. And then we also calculate the average revenue per paying user based on the revenue reported by SKAN. We compare these 2 numbers, and basically we identify the discrepancy or the error between them, which we want to minimize, of course. Now, using our advanced models, we basically let you select how many revenue ranges you want to define, and then we automatically suggest for you what would be the ideal revenue ranges to minimize the discrepancy and to maximize the accuracy of the reported revenue. So this is the revenue recommendation tool. The second tool is another very important feature. Now, one of the challenges with SKAN is that it limits the number of things that you can measure. So if you want to track multiple events, you often need to reduce the conversion values that you use. Now, the funnel feature in the Conversion Studio is one of the practical solutions for that, not the only one. And it's especially useful for you if your app has sequential nature of events. It's very relevant for shopping, also for investment firms, and sometimes also for gaming. I'll show you a few examples. But by using the funnel, you basically can reduce the number of conversion values you use for events and then free some space for revenue ranges or additional events. So if we take a concrete example, you can see that for a gaming app that wants to measure complete level 1, complete level 2, and complete level 3, without the funnel, we have to use 7 different conversion values. And with the funnel, we have to use only 3 different conversion values because we don't have to measure each of the combinations. We already know in advance that if complete level 3 happen, complete level 1 and complete level 2 happen. And the third feature is for more advanced customers, and I assume all of you advanced customers. So some customers just want the maximum flexibility when they define their SKAN conversion schema, and they prefer to map the revenue ranges, the in-app events, or both of them to each conversion value separately. Think about it of a way to create predefined groups of users based on their activity, and then just assign each group to conversion value or give it a name. I'll maybe have time to demonstrate it later on in the demo, but what you should keep in mind is that many customers, when they become comfortable enough with SKAN, they find this feature extremely useful to build something that is very custom-made for them and tailored to their needs. And lastly, and forgive me, but this one is a little bit more technical and operational one, but it's crucial because overlooking it can lead you to poor performance that is really hard to identify. Now, every player in the marketing system has its own event names. And to use SKAN signal for optimization, the networks need you to map the events on AppsFlyer platform to the names they recognize. And if you forget to map those event names, basically the networks won't have the data they need to translate the conversion values that they receive from SKAN prospects into meaningful events. And as a result, they won't be able to provide you with good performance. That's the bottom line for you. So please remember to map the events name correctly to the partners. And I know that's a lot to digest, but SKAN is a complex topic and there's a lot of knowledge we wanted to share with you. And the next topic we want to dive is something that I think many of you will find very interesting. Insights from our recent in-depth analysis about SKAN conversion schemas across the different verticals. And we didn't stop by just creating a few slides out of it. We even built a tool into the product to make this benchmark data accessible for everyone. So we call it SKAN conversion scheme templates. And the templates are just one of the tools that we've designed to help you focus on what is important for you. You can use them to simplify the setup for new apps. And for your existing apps, you can review and compare your current schema against the templates, refine it as needed, or simply just gain confidence that your schema is well-defined. In our research, we analyzed dozens of leading apps in each of the industries, and some of the recommendations are even calculated in real time and customized per each of the apps. So let me walk you through a few examples using this feature. So this is, for those of you that are not familiar with AppsFlyer platform, this is a platform. On the left side, you have the navigation bar, and under the settings, you have SKAN Conversion Studio here. You just need to select the app in which you want to define its conversion schema, and then you'll have here the industry template button. Always take time on demos. This is the way it is. Just a minute. Give it one more chance. Okay, we got it. So on the left side here, you have the different verticals. And for each vertical, here you can find the templates. For example, for gaming, we have the different gaming genres. Role-play gaming, casino, hyper-casual, etc. For shopping, we have one template that focuses on revenue and one that combines revenue and in-app event measurement. And just another example for finance, we have investment firms and mobile banking apps. Now, let's see what is a template, what is the format. So here you have the strategy. The strategy basically guides you whether the focus should be on in-app events measurement, revenue measurement, or a combination of both. You also have the SKAN version right here, which is by default SKAN 4 because this is what we recommend. But if you turn it off, basically the course conversion values in each of the prospects will not be available anymore. So let's turn it on for this session. This is maybe the most important part of the template. These are the suggested measurements. And you can find three types of measurements. One of them is revenue. The other one is in-app events, as you can see here, specific in-app event that we recommend you to measure. And lastly, there's the funnel, which combines multiple in-app events. And just to make it clear, I want to share with you a few examples. So let's review shopping, finance, and gaming example. So for shopping apps, we can see if you hover this tooltip here, you see that more than 65% of these apps decided to focus revenue. Now, many of them decided to combine this with in-app event measurement. And this is why we believe that with the right schema, you can combine both of them. So we recommended to use funnel feature to cover the entire or most of the user flow. And this is the most commonly measured funnel, by the way. It starts with product view, continue to add to cart, and finishes up with purchase event, the down the funnel event. Sometimes we see that customers replacing product view with search event or add to cart with checkout or wish list. But basically, this is the most commonly measured funnel. In terms of revenue, we have two options. if your app is eligible for revenue recommendation, which in simple words, it means that you have, let's say, 2 weeks of revenue data for your app, basically the suggested revenue ranges will be tailored for your app, something that is custom made and calculated in real time for you. But even if you don't have this enough historical data for the revenue, we also wanted to provide you with a better starting point. So we run our revenue models on the data of the top leading apps from the industry, and we offer you something to start with, which you can refine after 2 weeks when the revenue recommendation model will be available for you. So this is shopping apps. Let's take one from the finance domain. Let's take mobile banking apps. So here we see completely different approach. Okay, we see that they focus on in-app event measurement. And this is completely makes sense because mobile banking apps usually have strict privacy restrictions that prevent them from sharing the real revenue data with us. So most of them decided not to share the revenue data at all, and some of them decided to share the fake revenue data, but in SKAN, they focus on in-app event measurement. So you can see here that the most dominant event is basically complete registration. This is the first, as you can see in the benchmark insight, this is the first most measured event, okay? And sometimes in mobile banking apps, they even decided to break this down into a few sub-steps. For example, registration started, and then KYC, know your customer, sometimes even classification of the user based on the credit risk, and of course, the complete registration. We also see that the login event is very dominant, and this is why it is recommended to capture the retention data. And of course, all the key financial activities, such as deposit and transaction. Now, I want to take the last example from the gaming vertical. And let's take sport apps. So if you hover here the revenue data, you see that 99% of these genres, of the apps, the top leading apps in this genre, decided to measure revenue. Now, we usually see that they decided to combine it with a single event. And this is why we decided to, again, recommend on this approach, or a hybrid approach. In terms of which event you want to combine alongside the revenue ranges, and we have a tough competition here between tutorial completion and level completion. So it depends on the nature of your app, but we decided to recommend on tutorial completion. By the way, I haven't mentioned it, but of course you have all the recommendation for course conversion values of the first postback, the second postback, and the third postback. Now, once you feel comfortable enough and you selected the template that is suitable for your needs, you just need to click on select and customize here. And don't worry, this will not save your setup yet. You can still customize it. So after you click on it, launch the home later. Okay, but basically after you click on it, you still have access to all the recommendation and all the rationale behind the suggestions. So if you want to understand why we suggested revenue, you can hover this one. And if you want to understand what are the recommended in-app events, you can see it here with all the information. Now, we automatically try to match your specific event to each of the recommended events. But let's say, for example, that you don't have, that you use different names for the events. For example, you don't use something that is included tutorial completion and we couldn't find this event. The only thing you need to do is basically to map your specific event. So you can select any of the events and that's it. Okay, we automatically applied all the templates. You just need to complete the events. Click save here. And basically in a few clicks, your new app or your current app can start with template and have a valid, good conversion scheme. So basically this is the templates that we recently launched. I'll go back to the deck now. And I really hope you find these templates useful. But even if you don't, this is just the beginning of our journey towards fully automating SKAN configuration. We started with the templates. We also have the revenue recommendation in place. And there's the upcoming in-app event recommendations early next year. So stay tuned. But basically, we're fully committed to making SKAN simple and accessible for everyone and reduce its complexity. I think that we've covered the agenda for today. So I really hope it wasn't overwhelming and you can take something. I think it's a good time to answer some of the questions you've asked. And by the way, we selected a few that we believe that will add more value to today's session. I'll take the first one. But basically, one of the questions that we frequently asked is which SKAN version we recommend marketers to define in their conversion schema. So basically, there is a key trade-off here, okay? And the trade-off is between the data freshness of the earlier versions of SKAN, for example, SKAN 3, versus the longer measurement periods in SKAN version 4. And the number one reason why marketers decided to stick with with earlier versions of SKAN is basically due to this shorter 24 hours activity window. Now, another thing that you should take into consideration is the networks that you're using. So if you're primarily working with networks that don't support SKAN 4 yet, basically you might not get any extra benefits. So as a rule of thumb, our general recommendation is to go with SKAN version 4 because it provides enhanced capabilities and better measurement capabilities relative to the prior versions. It also aligns with other attribution kit that is about to come next year. But basically, this is the recommendation, going with SKAN version 4. Priya, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, sounds good. I think this is one of the questions we anticipated. So I'll read this one. I guess I'm sure everyone's curious about thoughts on Apple's recent announcement of the ad attribution kit and how does it differ from SKAN. So I'll kick this off and Gil, feel free to chime in the AppsFlyer perspective here. So we're very excited about ad attribution kit. This is the next version of Apple's user privacy preserving measurement framework. It builds upon SKAN 4 and earlier versions of SKAN and SKAN 4 were mixed, received mixed feedback from the advertisers. And this was expected to close some of the big gaps. And we did not see the level of features that close all the gaps. There are some exciting features. For example, re-engagement is one that has been addressed partially. So what AAK allows is enables you to measure re-engagement. In writing, AAK appears to close these gaps. And so fundamentally, the mechanism for AAK is still the same. It's aggregated reporting. There are conversion delays. And it still relies on crowd anonymity, but the re-engagement measurement is exciting. And we are excited to see how this gets adopted by the ecosystem across publishers, MMPs, and then networks like Moloco. Gil, do you want to add anything here?
Yeah, thank you. One thing is that we believe that the only accelerator for ad attribution kit adoption will basically be a new marketplace, alternative marketplace for the App Store that will be live. And then will be a key reason why to go with ad attribution kit. But unless this will happen, most of the networks develop their own retargeting and re-engagement solutions. So basically, as Priya mentioned, like the incremental value it brings at this stage is relatively limited. That being said, of course, we will support it, partially support it in the end of the quarter and also the first quarter of the next year. I'll take the next question, Priya. And this one is also very frequently asked. So how should marketers use and analyze the course conversion values in the second and third prospects if you're utilizing SKAN version 4? So keep in mind that course conversion values are usually good for high-level insights, like basic retention data. Sometimes they are even not available because of the crowd anonymity mechanism that Priya mentioned before. So sometimes the data is masked. This is why we recommend not to exclusively rely on those signals. And in AppsFlyer, we take the approach of modeling the longer measurement periods. For example, revenue or in-app event metrics for day 7 and soon to come on day 30. So basically what we recommend is to utilize those signals to validate the models and improve the models for the longer measurement period, but we recommend to rely on modeled metrics for the longer measurement periods. Priya, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, sounds good. I think the one that's relevant, that's another frequently asked question at Moloco by our customers is wanting to know, does Moloco have a SKAN-specific model that targets and optimizes for SKAN traffic? From a technical point of view, we have dedicated ensuring our clients receive the best performance. Our machine learning leverages all kinds of different inputs, including some of the SKAN input, which is the new model that we're testing. And we've been making a lot of performance improvements with this approach. And Moloco is committed to deliver the best ads performance for SKAN-focused advertisers.
Great.
I'll hand it back to you, Gil.
Perfect. So one more on my side, and I think this one is very important. So is it better to rely on SKAN reporting or stick with classic MMP attribution? Now, in the iOS fragmented world, this is one of the key questions that people ask themselves. And relying exclusively on SKAN reporting involves some important trade-off in terms of the data richness and the data freshness. But on the other hand, when we analyze the data, we identify that there are some cases where SKAN attribute installs that were considered as organic in the MMP attribution. And this is why we recommend not to compromise on rely exclusively on SKAN or MMP, but to go with a combined approach, a single source of truth that we discussed before. Basically merge the data to a unified view, including all attribution sources, remove all the duplication, and provide you with one view that you can make decision based on. So we recommend to use single source of truth and not compromise on each of the attribution sources. Priya, do you have one more?
Yep, I can take this live question from Robin Mercado. The question is, I've spent over $60,000 on iOS campaign on Google, but still seeing null SKAN data. How do I investigate whether this is related to null conversion issue? And is there a spend threshold for reference? This is a very common question that we receive and a common pain point as discussed earlier. What I would recommend is you can partner with ad networks like Moloco. In our best practice, we can run a toolkit for growth to identify the recommended budget. It really depends on your app vertical and the kind of users you're going after. And one of our best practice is to roughly target 20 to 25 installs. And the budget recommendation that we generate is in line with that, hitting that 25 installs for your app. So we're happy to work with you, Robin, if you want to reach out to Moloco. Thanks.
I think we have one more question, unanswered question here in the chat. So about this last 4 days can give incomplete picture. What I meant when I said it is basically that it takes, let's say, up to 2 days of SKAN data to be received. So if it takes 2 days, to accumulate the information, because the SKAN version 4, basically the first activity window is 48 hours, and then you have additional 48 hours of delay, possible delay. It basically means that if you analyze yesterday, you don't have all the information. You only have a very small piece of information available in your dashboards and reports, which can lead you to make incorrect decisions. This is why we recommend basically to wait three days or be conservative in 4 days if you're only looking on SKAN data. So I think that we finished with the questions. Great, it's clear. That's it, okay? And I want to thank all of you very much for taking the time and join us today. I really hope the session was helpful and that you can walk away with one insight that you can start and implement tomorrow, as I said in the beginning of this webinar. I really look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, take care and stay tuned for more. Thank you so much, Priya, for joining us.
Thank you, Gil, for having us. And thanks, everyone, for joining. This is just the beginning of the conversation. Let's continue this in subsequent webinars.
Thank you so much.